Hey everyone, welcome to Inside Marketing. This time our panel is going to consider a topic that I love, which is if you go to a company and you amass a bunch of social media followers, maybe you brought some of those with you, maybe you accumulated them on the job, and then you leave, who owns them? So there's a great piece on the Flack by Peter Himmler that talks specifically about this, and I'd love to hear from our panel. What do you think? Does the business own your followers? Do you own the followers? What do you think, Shopa?
Well, it's so funny because it really sounds like the whole taking away your Rolodex thing of the 1980s, you know? But they are personal contacts, right? Even though they were formed in a professional environment, they are ultimately it's a person to person relationship, and I think that's really what social media is all about. So to say that the business owns that relationship really, I mean, it doesn't make sense to me, especially if it's a personal handle. And, so, I mean, if you want to say that for Twitter followers, is that the same for Facebook and LinkedIn and any other social network? Can you not communicate with people that you formed relationships with during your time at a certain company once you've left? I don't see how that argument could be justified.
Well, Shilpa, the way I look at it is the social media these days, these personal contacts are personal, but they're being leveraged and used to bring in income for the company. They're an asset for that company. And if these followers are being acquired during company time and for use of the company absolutely owns them. They can't, it's an asset that they're losing that you can't take away as you leave the company.
I mean, the very nature of Twitter really doesn't allow individuals to talk just about their company to anyone else on Twitter. I mean, if they do that, then the chances of anyone following them in the first place are very limited. So the need for personal communication, I think, really transcends beyond the sales process, if you want to think about it that way. So yes, they are a potential customer or even an actual customer, but they're also individuals that, through Twitter, many people build much deeper relationships with, whether it's intellectual, it could be a shared hobby or anything like that. The other thing, I mean, each person has a different take on it, but most people that I know of use Twitter, especially if it's a personal handle, both for business and personal use, right? So there is a clear overlap between your personal and professional lives, and so to isolate one from the other, I don't see how that would make any sense.
I agree. I think the lines are blurry, but at the same time, the sales process, even before Twitter and before social media, it was building personal relationships. And you couldn't leave a company taking customers that you'd acquired already, even though a lot of it was just through personal, friendship building. Even though without social media, you couldn't leave with those customers. And by leaving with your followers, you're denying your business and your prior business stuff, things that you acquired for them.
Well, I mean, the other thing I think is if a company allows one individual to hold the relationship with a potential client and have no other way of interacting with that individual, that's kind of stupid on the company's part. I mean, there should always be multiple touch points, and Twitter should not be the only way that someone is in touch with what an individual at a company is doing.
Absolutely, but I mean, Twitter is a huge part of communicating, especially in this digital age. I mean, obviously, you're not going to have one contact whose only interactions with social media, but at the same time, social media is a big part of communicating and generating leads. So you can't negate the importance of a person's Twitter handle to a company. And I absolutely understand why businesses want to keep these Twitter handles to themselves.
So let me suggest a middle ground here that I think it may be a result of, what's the role of this person, right? If it's all about your brand, if you're sort of a spokesperson for the company or a thought leader for the company, and it's about building your brand. For example, you've written a book, you have your context, you're essentially leveraging your personal brand to help build the brand of the business. You're probably going to be doing some of that through your own Twitter handle, for example, again, using Twitter. Some hopefully is being leveraged on various accounts that the business has. So there, you're tweeting also from the business accounts. You're retweeting each other's messages. So I think if it's all about the person, if the person's the brand, I think that the person sort of owns those contacts, to Jeff's point. But if your job is, business development or social marketing, and your role is essentially creating a list and cultivating contacts when you leave, just like if I was, outbound calling and building a list for the business, that list belongs to the business. So I think it's role dependent, and also it's going to be a function of what type of employment agreement you can get away with. If you're a sales guy and you bring relationships to your job and then you leave, you still can take those relationships with you. But if they're relationships that you started just for the business typically will own those relationships. And I think it's no different when we talk about social channels. So I'll give Shilpa the last word here. What do you think?
I think that's a really backwards argument. I don't agree with that in this day and age, but that's just me. I understand, obviously there's merit to both sides of the argument, but I think, companies are seeing it. There's definitely a blurring of the lines, and it is a really interesting question. I'm not sure that we've reached an answer here, but it's definitely a very intriguing notion.
I agree. So maybe that's a backwards argument, but I think we'll keep it at that. I think it's going to depend on the type of business. It's going to depend on the type of employment agreement that you can put in place with certain types of employees. But if somebody arrives with relationships, this goes back to way before social media, they're going to expect that they can take those relationships with them. If you've uniquely created those relationships, on the job, and especially if that's your job, then I think the business expects to have some ownership to those relationships. Maybe it's not exclusive, but some ownership to those lists after somebody leaves. So with that, it's a wrap with this episode of Inside Marketing. We'll see you the next time.